They say a wedding is supposed to be the best day of a woman's life. And maybe it is. For the bride. For Wren, standing at the edge of the reception tent with a glass of champagne she hadn't touched, it was something else entirely. It was the slow, quiet closing of a door she'd been holding open for 20 years. Because the man raising his glass at the center of the room, the one with the easy smile and the loosened tie, the one everyone was turning to look at, that was Reed. And in 1 week, he was going to marry her sister. If I could have everyone's attention. Reed tapped a fork against crystal. The room hushed the way rooms always did for him. They always had. I want to thank you all for coming out to Ashmore. For us. He reached down and found Sienna's hand. They looked like something out of a catalog. Her all-golden hair and effortless laughter. Him broad-shouldered and sun-warmed, the kind of handsome that made strangers trust him too quickly. Wren's mother pressed a napkin to the corner of her eye and whispered loud enough for half the tent to hear that no one had ever deserved her Sienna the way Reed did. Wren almost laughed, because she'd written the speech. 3 nights ago in her tiny kitchen, Reed had slouched at her table with a beer, sweating a ring onto the wood. You know I'm hopeless at this stuff, Wren. Come on, please. And she'd said yes. Because she always said yes. She'd been saying yes to Reed Calloway since they were 9 years old, and he'd moved into the house across the street and knocked on her door and asked if she wanted to go down to the creek, even though she'd been afraid of the water her whole life. She said yes anyway. She said yes at 14 when he needed someone to talk to about the girl who broke his heart. Said yes at 17 when he needed his history papers written, because football, because practice, because you're so much better at words than me. Said yes at 26 when he sat in that same kitchen and asked almost shyly if she'd be okay with him dating her little sister, Sienna. Younger by 15 months, the bright one. The one who moved through the world collecting everything she wanted, without seeming to try, and eventually collecting the one thing Wren had ever truly wanted for herself. Wren had said yes to that, too. Across the tent, Reed caught her eye, and he winked. That old familiar wink, the one that used to make her stomach drop like a stone off a bridge. To my beautiful bride, he finished, lifting the glass higher. Thank you for making all my dreams come true. The room burst into applause, and Wren felt it close around her, like a hand around her throat. I promise you won't ever see me cry. She thought it clearly, deliberately, the way you'd make a vow. After all these years of waiting for him to look at me, to really look at me, it's over. He's marrying her, and I'm going to smile through every minute of it. Excuse me, she murmured, setting the untouched glass on the nearest table. I need some air. No one noticed her go, which was, she thought, the story of her entire life. Outside, the sun was melting into the ocean, bleeding orange and rose across a sky too beautiful to be fair. The Ashmore estate sprawled behind her manicured lawn, string lights rented perfection. Ahead past the trimmed grass, the ground gave way to a wall of towering pines, standing dark and patient in the dying light. She hesitated at the tree line, just for a moment. Then she stepped into the trees. God, why am I like this? She thought. Walking without direction, her heels sinking into soft earth. Still hung up on a childhood crush who's about to marry my sister. Anyone normal would have moved on years ago. Gotten a life, gotten a therapist, gotten anything but this. The light dimmed faster than she expected. Shadows stretched long and strange across a forest floor that felt suddenly unfamiliar. She looked back. The lights of the estate had vanished behind a curtain of pine. Time to go back. Except when she turned to retrace her steps, the path she thought she'd followed simply wasn't there. She walked anyway. 10 minutes. 15. The air grew damp and cold against her bare arms, and her heart began a slow, uneasy climb up into her throat. "Hello," she called. "Is anyone out here?" Her own voice came back to her. Nothing else. "You're fine," she told herself, choosing a direction at random. "Just keep walking. You'll hit the estate. You always hit something eventually." But the forest had changed around her. The pines loomed taller here, older. The underbrush thickened until it clawed at her dress. Only thin ribbons of moonlight found their way through the canopy, laying shifting patterns across the ground. A twig snapped. Wren froze. She strained to listen over the pounding of her own heart, and beneath it, there, footsteps. Slow, measured, following. "Is someone there?" Her voice wavered and died in the damp air. Silence answered. She picked up her pace. But the feeling of being watched only tightened around her, and the air itself seemed to hum alive and electric, the hair rising along her arms. Another sound, a soft crunch of leaves closer now, and she whirled around, heart slamming. A shadow flickered between the trees. Too large for a rabbit. Too big for a fox. Then a low growl rolled through the dark, and every animal instinct she owned screamed at her to run. Something moved in the brush to her right. She was already turning to bolt when a rabbit exploded out of the undergrowth and shot across her path. A choked, hysterical laugh tore out of her. "Oh, thank God." She pressed a shaking hand to her chest. "You idiot. It's a rabbit. It's just a—" She turned, and there, close enough to touch silent, as something that had never once made a sound in its life, stood a wolf. It was enormous. Its fur was white, not the dull white of old snow, but something luminous, almost silver, where the moonlight caught it. And its eyes. God, its eyes. A pale glacial blue, the blue at the very center of a flame. They were fixed on her with an intelligence that had no business living behind an animal's face. A scream ripped out of Wren before she could stop it, and her body folded on instinct arms thrown over her head, knees, buckling, curling herself small against the earth. What are you supposed to do? Run. Stand still. Don't show fear. Oh God, I'm showing fear. I'm doing the fear thing. I'm going to die in a rented forest in a bridesmaid dress, and Sienna's going to be furious I ruined her wedding week. The seconds stretched into something unbearable. She held her breath until her lungs burned. And nothing happened. No weight of jaws. No pain. Then something cold and wet touched the back of her hand. A nose. Her whole body went rigid. The wolf was sniffing her, learning her, tasting the scent of her fear, and any moment now it would decide which part of her to the nose withdrew. And so slowly, so carefully, Wren lowered her arms just enough to look. Their eyes met, and something in her chest shifted, some tectonic thing she had no name for. The fear didn't leave, but it changed. It became something closer to awe. Up close, the white fur was threaded with strands of true silver, and those impossible eyes held hers, with a patience that felt almost she couldn't say it, even in her own head, almost tender. The longer she looked, the more certain she became, past all reason, that this creature did not want to hurt her. She lowered her arms the rest of the way. Her hand lifted. She didn't decide to do it. It simply rose, drawn by something older than thought, and the wolf extended its great head to meet her fingers. The contact went through her like a current. Its fur wasn't coarse. It was soft, impossibly soft, like running her hand through water made solid. She pressed deeper and felt the warmth of muscle beneath, and a sound rumbled up out of the animal, deeper than a growl, something that vibrated under her palm and settled behind her ribs. "You like that," she whispered, and her own voice sounded strange to her. The wolf's eyes drifted half-closed. For one wild, unraveling second, she wondered if it was someone's pet. Then she took in its size again the wrongness of those knowing eyes, and understood how foolish that was. This was not an animal anyone had ever tamed. This was not an animal that could be. "I'm Wren," she said, and felt ridiculous, and felt at the very same time that it was the most natural thing in the world. The wolf tilted its head. A small motion, but so precise, so deliberately human, that her breath caught. "I don't suppose," she said, half laughing at herself. "You know the way back." The wolf turned, took several slow, purposeful steps into the dark, then looked back at her over its shoulder with an expression she could only describe as impatient. "You want me to follow you?" Another pointed look. "I have officially lost my mind," Wren muttered, and got to her feet. She followed. Every time doubt slowed her steps. Every time the sane part of her brain shrieked that she was chasing a predator. Deeper into the woods, the wolf would stop and turn, and give that same imperious little jerk of its head. And somehow, God help her, she kept going. They walked for a long time, or no time at all. She couldn't tell. And then, through the trees, lights, voices drifting on the cold air. "Wren, Wren, where are you?" Reed's voice, carrying above the others, worried and sure of itself. "Here," she called back before she could think. "I'm here." A growl, sudden, low, fierce. She turned and the wolf was already backing away. Its eyes locked on something past her shoulder, and in them was something she could only call hatred. Then it wheeled and loped into the dark, swallowed whole between one heartbeat and the next. And in her chest, where warmth had been, a strange hollow opened up, like something precious had just been taken from her, which made no sense at all. "Wren, sir!" Reed crashed through the underbrush and seized her by the arms. "Are you okay? God, your dress, what happened?" "I got lost," she said. The truth stuck sideways in her throat. He'd never believe it. She barely believed it herself. "Well," his hand found her shoulder. "I'm glad you're safe." His touch didn't do anything. She noticed that distantly as he steered her back toward the light. His hand on her shoulder, same hand that once could stop her heart. And there was nothing now. No prickle, no spark. Just the warm, ordinary weight of a man's palm. Sienna was waiting on the back terrace, arms crossed tight over her chest. "She's back," she called through the open doors. Then she turned a cold look on Wren. "Can you please not do that again? Disappear like that. This is my wedding week. I wasn't trying to. You knew people would worry." Sienna's voice had the polished edge of someone who had never once had to wonder if she was loved. "Just keep it together. Okay." Wren swallowed the defense rising in her throat. It's her week, she reminded herself. It's about her. It's always about her. "Okay," she said. Hours later showered her ruined dress, balled up in the corner, her body clean, but her mind anything but. Wren rose to close the curtains against the night, and stopped. A flash of white at the tree line. The wolf stood at the edge of the forest, its eyes catching what little light there was, and throwing it back, like two pale stars, burning in the dark. It held her gaze across the black expanse of lawn. Held it, until she forgot to breathe. Then it turned and melted into the trees like it had never been there at all. Wren stood at the window a long time after it was gone. She should have been afraid. Any sane woman would have been afraid. Instead, she pressed her palm flat against the cold glass, in the place where the wolf had stood, and felt that hollow open in her chest again. She didn't sleep much that night. She dreamed of the forest, of moonlight pooling silver in a clearing, of white fur under her fingers turning somehow to warm skin stretched over muscle, of strong arms circling her waist, and a voice deep, rough, impossibly gentle saying her name against her throat. Wren. She woke with her heart slamming and her hand pressed to her own neck. The dream had felt more real than the room around her. She lay in the gray before dawn and tried to slow her breathing. But every time she closed her eyes, those pale eyes were there watching, and her skin was burning. Not with fever, exactly, with something she had no word for, a restlessness that lived under her skin and would not be still, until she couldn't stand it anymore. She pulled a jacket over her nightgown more out of habit than need, because the truth was, she wasn't cold. She hadn't been cold in the forest either. She realized in nothing but a thin dress. And that was strange. That was one more strange thing in a night full of them, and she added it to a list she didn't yet know she was keeping. Outside, the air was cool and heavy with dew. It should have chilled her. Instead, it was the only relief she'd felt all night, and she walked toward it. Not toward the trees this time, but toward the sound of waves breaking somewhere below the property's edge. Where the manicured garden surrendered to wild scrub, she found stone steps cut into the cliff face spiraling down toward a hidden cove. The first faint purple of dawn lit a private beach below, and on the sand at the water's edge, a flash of white. The wolf stood with the waves lapping at its paws, staring out to sea. It hadn't seen her. There was something in the way it held itself in the stillness of it that spoke of a loneliness so deep it made her chest ache to look at it. And then, between one breath and the next, the impossible happened. The wolf's shape blurred, rippled, rearranged, and where the animal had stood there was now a man, tall, powerfully built, and in the dim light unclothed the first hint of dawn, tracing the long line of his back and shoulders. Wren blinked hard, certain her exhausted mind was inventing him, because wolves did not become men. They did not. They simply Wren, Sienna's voice right behind her. The man on the sand turned sharply, and for one suspended, breathless second, the growing light caught his face. I was beautiful. Beautiful in a way that hurt to look at feral, unpolished, all-high cheekbones, and hollow shadows, and dark hair falling across his forehead. And his eyes. The same eyes that had haunted her all night. A hand landed on Wren's shoulder, and she nearly leapt out of her skin. "What are you doing out here?" Sienna pulled her robe tighter, peering past her. "Oh my God, is that a private beach?" Wren looked back at the sand. The man was gone. The cove lay empty. Nothing but the relentless wash of waves against wet sand. "I couldn't sleep," Wren managed. Sienna was already grabbing her hand, already tugging her toward the stone steps, chattering about how perfect it was, how the light hit the water, how she needed to move part of the wedding down here, because it would be criminal not to. Wren followed, barely hearing her, drawn to the exact patch of sand where the man, the wolf, had stood. The tide had already erased whatever footprints might have been there, if there had ever been any at all. Later that morning, everything changed course. Sienna decided the cocktail hour had to happen on the hidden cove. No argument. And when the wedding planner, a composed woman named Elise with watchful dark eyes, said gently that it wouldn't be possible that the beach belonged to her brother, and her brother would never agree Sienna did what Sienna always did, she got upset, and she volunteered Wren to fix it. "Wren can go talk to him," Sienna said. "She doesn't have anything else to do this week anyway." Elise's gaze had drifted just once to Reed's arm, draped casually across Wren's shoulders. Something flickered across the woman's face, a flash of puzzlement, almost of recognition, and it made Wren step out from under Reed's arm without quite knowing why. "My brother," Elise said slowly, the way you'd explain something to a child, "will never agree. But—" She paused and her eyes moved to the tree line and stayed there. "You can try." Wren followed her gaze. At the edge of the forest, half hidden, behind a massive pine, stood the white wolf, watching her. And Elise, she realized, was watching it too, her face suddenly alert, suddenly wary, all her composure gone. Wren didn't dare ask if she saw it. She was too busy trying to understand the thing happening inside her own chest. The pull, the certainty, the way every cell in her body seemed to lean toward the creature across the distance, like a compass finding north for the very first time. "This is insane," she told herself. "He's a stranger. He's an animal. He's both, which is impossible, and I'm losing my mind so close to my sister's wedding that she'll take it as a personal insult." But she didn't look away, and neither did the wolf. For a long moment, the two of them simply stood there, the woman on the lawn and the creature in the trees, held together by something neither of them had chosen and neither of them could name. Then a voice called Elise's name from the house, and the spell broke. And when Wren looked back, the wolf was gone. She knew then that she had spent 20 years wanting a man who never once saw her standing there. And she knew with a certainty that terrified her that something in those woods had looked at her, really looked at her, and seen straight down to the bottom of who she was. She just didn't understand yet why that made her want to weep, or why walking back toward the house with her arms wrapped around herself against a cold. She couldn't feel. She caught herself listening past the waves, past the voices, past the whole bright, ordinary morning, for a howl. The house that Kellen Thorne lived in was built to keep secrets. Wren understood that the moment Elise's car turned up the long gravel drive, and it came into view, a great gray stone thing crouched in the trees, ivy climbing its walls like grasping fingers, its windows reflecting the overcast sky like a row of watchful, suspicious eyes. "You're wasting your time," Elise said, not unkindly. "My brother will never agree to your sister's little beach party." "She's stubborn." A surprised laugh escaped Elise. "I've had worse." Wren watched the woman's hands on the wheel. Steady, careful. The hands of someone used to managing things that could not be managed. "He practically raised me," Elise said, softer now, when Wren asked how they got along. "After our father passed." "I'm sorry." Something went tight in Elise's jaw. "Don't be." And Wren, who had learned to read a shift in a room the way other people read weather, let it go. Inside the house was all dark wood and hushed footsteps. A butler led her down winding corridors, and along the way, the staff kept pausing in their work to look at her, to stare, to murmur to each other the moment she passed, which she told herself she was imagining, except she wasn't. And some new instinct she didn't recognize told her they were smelling her, which was insane. So she filed it away with everything else on the list she still didn't know she was keeping. The waiting room had high ceilings and rain against the leaded glass. 20 minutes passed, then 30, and just when she'd decided he'd forgotten her entirely, The butler returned. "He'll see you now, miss." Kellen Thorne sat behind an imposing desk with his back half turned, the phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what the board thinks," he said. "The conservation land is non-negotiable." That voice. Wren froze mid-step, because she'd heard that voice before, in her dreams, rolling through a clearing full of silver light, saying her name against her throat. Her eyes found his hand, first long fingers tapping an impatient rhythm on the polished wood, then the line of his shoulders under an expensive suit, then his profile as he shifted the straight nose, the hard angle of the jaw, the dark hair with its premature silver at the temples. Something fluttered behind her ribs, something that recognized him. "We're done discussing this," he said. "Honor the agreement, or I'll see you in court." He turned, just enough for her to see his eyes. The wolf's eyes set in a man's face. Her lungs simply stopped working. It's him. It's the wolf. It's the man from the beach. The man from the dream. He's real, he's here, he's wearing a tie. Oh my God. He's wearing a tie. "Have a seat," he said, and gestured at the chair across from him, and she waited for it. The flicker. The moment his eyes would widen, the moment he'd know her, the way she knew him. Nothing. "Kellen Thorne," he said, extending his hand. She just stared at it. "Is there something on my face?" he asked. "No, sorry, When his hand closed around hers, she nearly wept. His skin was warm, his grip firm, and the simple fact of his touch made her feel like she'd just found something precious she hadn't known she'd lost. He pulled his hand back a little too fast. A small frown appeared between his brows. "My sister said you had something to discuss," he said. "Regarding a wedding." "Not mine," Wren blurted. "My sister's. I'm single." He looked briefly put off. Right. She got through it somehow. The beach. The cocktail hour. Sienna's heart set on the cove. "No," he said, before she'd even finished. "But you don't even know what I know. And the answer is no. And that should have been that." Except she couldn't make herself stand up. Because every part of her was screaming to stay in the room with him, to keep him talking, to reach across that desk, and do what exactly? She had no idea. She only knew the thought of walking out that door felt like a small death. "I saw you," she heard herself say. "This morning, on the beach." His eyes narrowed, dangerously. "I mean, I couldn't sleep. I went for a walk. And you were, if that's all." He was already looking at the door. "I'm Wren," she said, desperate, grasping. It didn't work. All she got was a curt nod. "A pleasure. Now, if you'll excuse me." She walked out in a daze. What just happened? He looked straight through me. He looked at me the exact way Reed has looked at me my whole life. Like I'm part of the room. Like I'm something the eye slides over without stopping, and it shouldn't hurt. I don't even know this man. Except it does. It hurts like something's been torn out of me, and I want to cry. And that is completely, certifiably insane. She made it to the car before the first tear fell. The gift started that night. Reed found the first one. He'd come by her cottage on the estate grounds, restless, avoiding Sienna's pre-wedding storms, and dropped down onto the edge of her bed, the way he always had, easy and thoughtless, like her space was his to occupy. And a lighter fell out of his pocket. "You're smoking again," she said. "Don't tell your sister." He knelt to fish the lighter out from under the bed. Cursed, reached deeper, and then snapped his hand back with a sound of pure disgust. "What the hell is this?" He held it up. A rabbit, dead. its small head hanging limp, a clean, dark line of dried blood along the break in its neck. Wren's stomach dropped. But underneath the horror, treacherous and immediate, was something else. Something that whispered for me. Something that understood at a level below language that this was an offering. That something in the dark had killed and carried and hidden it here for her, and that this was meant to say, I can provide. She shoved the thought down as hard as she could, because that was the most frightening thing that had happened yet. Not the rabbit. The part of her that was pleased by it. The estate manager blamed a cat. Reed wanted to sue. And Wren, for Sienna's sake, let it go, even when the next morning the kitchen sent up a bowl of rabbit stew instead of the breakfast she'd ordered, and insisted gently and strangely that she eat it. She ate every bite. She didn't let herself wonder why. The second gift was worse. It was the morning 2 days before the wedding, and a scream from the driveway pulled the whole house out into the gray light. Wren's mother stood frozen on the gravel with her hands pressed to her mouth. At her feet lay a moose, enormous, dead, and arranged around its body in a wide and deliberate circle were rabbits. A dozen of them, at least, laid out like the points of some dark compass, an offering, or a warning, or a gift too large to misunderstand. Sienna and Reed rushed to their mother, but Wren stood rooted where she was, and she knew the way she knew her own name, that this was meant for her. And to her horror, what unfurled in her chest was not fear. It was awe. Something out there was strong enough to provide for her, so completely, so abundantly, that a part of her, a part she was only beginning to meet, went warm and still and satisfied. She could feel the eyes on her from the trees. Patient, waiting. I am being hunted, she thought, and I have never in my whole life felt so wanted. Which was when Wren understood she needed answers. Real ones. Because a woman who feels chosen by a predator has stopped thinking clearly, and Wren had spent too long not thinking clearly about a man. She would not do it again with a wolf. So she drove into town, to the county library, where a soft-voiced librarian pulled newspaper archives, and Wren found the name that would unspool everything. Nora Vance, 23 years old, found dead on the private beach at Ashmore, 10 years ago. The photograph was grainy, but Wren could see she'd been lovely. The article used the clinical, careful language reporters use for things too terrible to say plainly. An animal attack. Injuries beyond what any single creature should have been able to inflict. Discovered at dawn. And the librarian, lowering her voice the way people do when they're passing on something they half believe, told Wren what the reports left out. That the local story went darker. That the wounds hadn't looked like a hunt. They'd looked like something crueler. Like grief that had lost its shape. But Wren didn't stop there. Because a name in an old newspaper is a tragedy, and she was tired of women being only tragedies. She was tired of it in a way that felt personal, though she couldn't have said why. So she kept pulling threads, an obituary, a mention in a church bulletin, and finally in a box of donated local papers, a small remembrance written by a friend. And Nora Vance became a person. She had wanted to be a marine biologist. She'd loved the water used to swim in that cove at dawn, before anyone was awake, which was why she'd been there. She kept a journal. She wrote letters she never mailed. She had been in the last months of her life, radiantly, secretly, terrifyingly in love. Wren sat in the quiet of the library with the photocopies spread in front of her, and felt something fierce rise up in her chest. You were real, she thought. You were a whole person with a whole life, and they turned you into a ghost story to scare tourists. Well, not to me. To me, you're going to be a woman who deserved better. Whatever happened to you, I'm going to find out. And I'm going to make it mean something. She didn't yet know how close that promise would cut. Elise found her that evening sitting on the cottage steps with the photocopies in her lap. And Elise went very, very still when she saw the name. Where did you get those? The library. Elise, Wren looked up. I need you to tell me the truth. About your brother. About the wolf. About all of it. For a long moment, Elise said nothing. The wind moved through the pines. Somewhere far off, an animal called and was answered. Then Elise sat down beside her on the step, put her face in her hands, and told her. My family is cursed. She said it plainly, the way you'd report a fact about the weather. Not a metaphor, Wren. A real one. Old. It runs in the men of our bloodline. Elise stared out at the darkening trees. They're shifters. Wolves. All of them. My brother most of all, he's the alpha now. Wren's mouth was dry. The white wolf. Is Kellen? Yes. And then Elise told her the shape of the thing, and it was so much worse than Wren had imagined. Every man born into the thorn line, Elise said, carries the same curse. Their wolf can recognize its fated mate, the one person in all the world meant to make them whole. The wolf knows her instantly, craves her, would cross any distance, break any law to be near her. But the man cannot. The human half can't remember her, Elise said. Can't hold on to her. Every time he meets her as a man, she's a stranger to him. He passes the one person he's meant to love without ever knowing she's there. Her voice cracked just slightly. The wolf remembers everything. The man remembers nothing. And it drives them mad. Splits them right down the middle. The wolf desperate to claim what the man keeps forgetting. The man walking past his own destiny over and over for the rest of his life. Wren thought of Kellen's blank, courteous eyes across the desk. And she understood. She understood everything. That's why he doesn't know me, she whispered. Every time we meet. He's not pretending. Elise looked at her, and in her eyes was a terrible, tender pity. No, she said, he's not, because that was the thing Wren realized. She'd been the unseen one her whole life, the sister who wrote the speeches, the girl the man across the street never quite noticed. And now, at last, someone loved her with everything he had. And he would never ever be able to remember her face. Of course, she thought, and a laugh came up her throat that was half a sob. Of course it's like this. Of course the one person who could ever really see me is cursed to forget me the second he becomes a man. Because that's my whole life, isn't it? Wanted and forgotten. Chosen and set down. Except now it's a wolf instead of Reed, and somehow that's worse. That's so much worse because the wolf actually... She couldn't finish the thought. There's more, Elise said quietly. And you're not going to like it. There was a bottle by Kellen's bed, Elise told her. A dark liquid she prepared herself from her grandmother's recipe. A sedative. Strong enough to hold the wolf down, to keep it from shifting, to keep it from going to her. He'd started taking it the moment the first strange restlessness came over him, weeks before Wren ever arrived, before either of them understood what was pulling him toward the eastern woods. But it's killing something in him, Elise said. Every dose. The drug doesn't just sedate the wolf, it burns out the memories. What little the man can hold on to her scent, the shape of her face. Her name, it takes those too. Faster. And faster. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. He's choosing it, Wren. Every night. He looks at that bottle knowing exactly what it costs him, and he drinks it anyway, because he would rather lose every trace of you than risk becoming the thing that could hurt you. Ren couldn't speak. Why? She finally managed. Why would he? What is he so afraid of? And Elise's face changed, went pale, went old. Because he's seen it happen, she said. He's seen what a thorn wolf does to the woman it can't have. He's seen exactly what it looks like when the man loses and the wolf wins. Ren looked down at the photocopies in her lap, at the grainy, lovely face of Nora Vance. She breathed. It happened to her. Nora. She was his mate. He killed her. No. Elise's voice was sharp, almost violent. No, you have it wrong. She wasn't Kellen's mate. She stopped, swallowed, and when she went on, her voice had dropped to almost nothing. The voice of someone speaking a thing they had kept locked away for 10 years. She was our father's. The wind died. Ren went cold all the way through. Our father found her, Elise said, staring at nothing. On that beach at dawn, during her sunrise swim. His wolf knew her the second it saw her, and he couldn't stop it. The bottle came later. Kellen and I made it. Afterward. We swore no thorn would ever again, but our father had no such mercy. The wolf took him, and it went to her, and it claimed her the only way a wolf knows how. The bite, Ren whispered. The bite. Elise's tears were falling freely now. It's meant to seal the bond. For one of us it's a wedding. For a human. She shook her head. Her body couldn't survive what it started. It broke her, Ren. From the inside. She died in the sand, while the man our father had been came back to himself just long enough to understand what the wolf had done. Ren's hands were shaking. And Kellen is the one who ended it. Elise met her eyes, and it was the hardest thing Ren had ever watched anyone do. Our pack has one law above all others. A wolf that turns feral, that loses the man completely, and kills, cannot be allowed to live. Our father begged for it. On his knees, holding what was left of the woman he loved, he begged his own son to carry out the law. She drew a breath that shuddered. Kellen was barely more than a boy, and he did it. He became Alpha the same night he buried his father and the woman his father killed. That is the man who looked through you across that desk, Ren. That is why he drinks the bottle. He would rather forget your name 1,000 times than stand where his father stood. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The night pressed close around the cottage. Somewhere out in the black wall of trees, Ren knew a white wolf was pacing, watching the windows, waiting for her, carrying dead rabbits to her door because it was the only language it had for a love the man could never remember he felt. And she should have been terrified. She was terrified. But underneath the terror, in the deep and secret place where the gifts had made her go warm and still something else had taken root. Because she knew now what it was to be loved by someone cursed to lose you. And she knew what it was to keep choosing that loss anyway, out of a terrible self-destroying tenderness. She'd been doing a smaller, sadder version of it her whole life. There's one more thing, Ren said, slowly. And I need you to tell me the truth, even if it sounds crazy. Elise waited. Ever since I got here, Ren said, things have been different. I don't get cold. Cuts heal overnight. I can't stand being inside for too long. I feel like I'm going to crawl out of my own skin. She looked down at her own hands, as if they belonged to a stranger. And the smell of things. The staff at your house, they were smelling me. Elise and I could tell. And that's not people can't. Elise had gone completely rigid. What did you say? She whispered. My whole life I never fit. I always felt like I came from somewhere else. Wren's voice began to tremble because the ground was moving under her, and she could feel it. Elise, I never told anyone this, but I'm adopted. My parents, they found me when I was a baby. She made herself say it. In the woods. Elise's face in the dark had gone bloodless. They found you, Elise said very carefully, in the woods. Abandoned. No one ever came looking. No missing baby, no. Wren stopped, because Elise had risen to her feet, was staring down at her like she was seeing her clearly for the very first time. And there was something in her face that looked almost like fear, and almost like hope. Elise. What? What is it? You're scaring me. Stand up, Elise said. Come inside. Now. Why? Because if what you're telling me is true, Elise said, and her voice shook on every word, then you're not what any of us thought you were. And that changes everything. It changes everything. Wren, do you understand? But Wren didn't understand. Not yet. She only stood in the dark on the cottage steps with the photocopies of a dead woman's life clutched to her chest, and the pines roaring in a rising wind, and somewhere out beyond the lawn, a howl went up long and low, and full of a longing that reached all the way down into her bones, and pulled. And for the first time in her life, without knowing why, without deciding to, without any human word for what she was doing, Wren lifted her head, and she almost howled back. Elise explained the rest inside by lamplight with the storm building against the windows. There was a law, she said, older than any of them. A wolf that goes feral, that loses the man entirely, and kills, must be put down. No exceptions. No mercy. The pack itself carries it out. But there's a second law, Elise said. Almost nobody remembers it because almost nobody has ever lived to use it. Wren waited. If a wolf's fated mate completes the bond, bites him back while he's still there, still himself it anchors him, holds the man in place. The feral turn can't take him. Elise's hands were white in her lap. It's the one thing that can save an alpha who's slipping. The one thing. Then why has no one? Because a wolf's mate is almost always human, Wren. Elise looked at her. And a human can't survive the bite long enough to give one back. It kills them first. It killed Nora. It would have killed you 3 days ago. She leaned forward. But you weren't found in those woods by accident. You were left there. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Your birth parents left a wolf-blooded child in the forest and told themselves she had no wolf because that's the cruelest shame there is among our kind. A shifter born who can't shift. They were wrong, or they were lying. Either way. Her voice dropped. You are the one thing in this world that can walk into that fire and come out the other side. Wren sat very still. I spent my whole life being the one who didn't fit, the one who got left, the one whose name nobody thought to call. And it turns out I was left because someone decided I was worth less than the thing they wanted me to be. Except now that same broken, thrown-away thing about me is the only thing in the world that can save him. Of course it is. Reed was drunk when she found him on the cottage porch that afternoon. She'd gone out to think, to breathe, to not decide anything reckless. And there he was, a tumbler of amber going warm in his hand, waiting for her, the way he'd waited for her his whole life thoughtlessly, certain she'd be there. "Going somewhere?" he asked. "Reed, you're drunk." "Little bit." He got to his feet unsteady and stepped into her path. "I've made a mistake, Wren. Don't. It's always been you." His words ran together. "I was just too blind to see it. We can fix this. The wedding, none of it matters." And here it was. The thing she'd wanted since she was a girl. The exact words in his exact voice offered up at last. He reached for her, leaned in, and Wren stepped back. "No," she said. He blinked, like the word didn't compute, like she'd spoken a language he'd never bothered to learn, because in 20 years she had never once said it to him. "No," she said again, and it came easier the second time, and God, it felt like setting down something she'd been carrying so long. She'd forgotten it had weight. "You don't love me, Reed. You love that I've always been here. You love that I say yes. That's not the same thing. It was never the same thing." Her voice didn't shake. She was almost surprised. "And I'm done being the girl who's grateful for the scraps." "Wren, you should go home. You're marrying my sister tomorrow, and she deserves someone who chose her first, not someone settling for her, because the woman across the street finally stopped waiting. Because that was the truth of it, wasn't it? She had spent 2 decades believing her worth was a thing Reed could grant her, if only he'd look. And he never looked. And now he was looking, and she understood at last that it had never been about him looking at all. It had been about her deciding she was already whole. The growl came from the tree line. Building. And Reed's face went white as the wolf stepped out of the shadows onto the gravel, massive, terrible. Its pale eyes fixed on him with a murder so total that Reed actually staggered. "Wren," he breathed. There's actually a don't move." The wolf stalked forward, each step deliberate, and its focus was locked on Reed, on the man who had leaned in, who had reached for her, whose scent was on the air, where he'd tried to take what the wolf had decided long ago was his to protect. "Kellen." Wren's voice cut across the gravel. Soft, steady. "Kellen, please." The great white ears twitched at the name, but the gold was already bleeding into those eyes, molten feral, the man drowning under the animal, and it did not slow. And then it lunged. Wren threw herself between them. She didn't decide to. Her body simply moved faster than she'd known it could, faster than a human body should, and the wolf's massive weight slammed into her instead of Reed, and the two of them went down in a tangle on the gravel, and behind her, the front door of the estate banged open, and voices erupted into screaming. "He means nothing." Wren gasped into the wolf's fur, her arms wrapping around its neck, pulling it closer instead of pushing it away. "Do you hear me? Nothing. It's you. It's always been you." The snarl softened, just barely, into a rumble she felt in her own chest where they touched. And then chaos, her mother wielding an umbrella pole like a bat, cracking it across the wolf's flank. The wolf wheeling with a roar. A second shape exploding from the trees, dark fur, familiar dark eyes, Elise slamming into her brother's side. And then more wolves, a whole ring of them pouring out of the forest, and one who ran straight for Wren, and became in the space between strides, a woman with an amulet at her throat, screaming, "Get her out of here, now." Hands seized Wren, her mother on one side, Sienna on the other. Reed diving into the back of the running car, the engine already going. "No," Wren fought them. "No, let me go. They'll kill him." Because that was the thing Elise had said. A feral alpha gets put down. And the pack had come, not to help him, but to end him, and Ren was the only one alive who could stop it, and they were dragging her away. "Drive!" her mother screamed. "Robert, drive!" The car lurched forward, spitting gravel. Ren threw herself against the back window palms flat on the glass and watched Kellen. Her Kellen stand alone in a ring of his own pack white fur going dark with blood, outnumbered, and refusing to fall. "He needs me," she said. "To no one, to everyone. It has to be me. Nobody else can—" "What does it want?" Sienna's voice was shrill with terror. "To claim me." Ren didn't take her eyes off the shrinking figures. "And I'm the only one it won't kill." Her father's hand went under the seat and came out with a handgun she had never seen in her life. "Stop the car," Ren said. Nobody stopped the car. Through the rear window, a flash of white broke onto the road behind them. Kellen, running, his strides eating the distance with a speed that shouldn't have been possible, and behind him, the pack giving chase 5-6 shapes, gaining with every second. "We're being followed," her father shouted. He passed the gun across. Her mother took the wheel. Her father braced the weapon against the seat back with hands that shook. And something in Ren broke open. "They're going to shoot him. They're going to shoot him, and it won't even save them. It'll just make the pack faster, and he'll die on this road, having spent his whole life forgetting the one person he loved, and I will have let them drag me away from the single thing my whole broken life was apparently for. It needs to be put down," Reed said, hysterical in the back seat. "That thing needs to be—" Something rose up out of Ren that was not a scream and was not human. A snarl, low, predatory. It tore out of her throat and filled the car, and Sienna shrank back against the door with her eyes gone huge, whispering, Ren, your eyes." But Ren was already moving. She lunged across her sister's lap, wrenched the door handle, and kicked it open into the rushing green blur of the world. Ren. No. She met her mother's eyes in the rearview mirror, saw the horror there, the love, the complete and total failure to understand, and she threw herself out of the moving car. The impact was brutal. The world spun, sky asphalt sky, and pain detonated through every inch of her as she rolled across the road and came to rest at last on the gravel shoulder, gasping for a breath that wouldn't come. She heard the shriek of brakes, her mother's scream, and then a shadow fell across her, and warm breath and a rough tongue lapping at the blood on her cheek, her forehead, her torn-up hands. She looked up into eyes gone gold with anguish. "I'm okay," she whispered. She wasn't. Her body was one long bruise, but none of it mattered. "I'm okay. I'm here." She reached up and buried her fingers in the fur at his neck and pulled him down toward her. Behind him, the pack broke from the trees, racing to reach them before it was too late. Behind her, her family spilled from the stopped car. Her mother's screams, a thin, far-off sound. Their eyes met, gold to brown, and through some new sense she'd only just grown. Ren felt what Kellen felt, the desperation, the love that had no home in his human mind, and so had lived all this time only in the animal. The certainty that the two of them here now, was the one right thing in a life built entirely out of loss. His need became hers. It burned through her blood. She tilted her head, bared the line of her throat. "Do it," she said, because this was hers to choose, not his to take. Nora hadn't chosen. Nora had been swimming at dawn and had a stranger's curse fall on her out of a clear sky. But Ren knew everything, now the law, the cost, the impossible odds. And she looked into those golden eyes, and she chose it anyway, wide awake, with her whole ruined body and everything she had left. "I know what I am," she whispered. "I know what this does. Kellen, I'm choosing you." His teeth grazed her skin, testing, hesitating. "Please," she said, and his jaws closed. The pain was white and total. It flared through her like a struck match, becoming a wildfire, and somewhere very far away, she heard the pack skid to a halt, heard her mother's scream cut off, heard the whole world hold its breath. Then something answered the pain. Deep inside her, deeper than bone, older than her name, something that had slept her entire life, opened its eyes. Her wolf. Kellen's mouth was full of her blood, and the taste of it dragged him back. She felt it happen through the bond, felt the animal recede, felt the man come rushing up like a diver, breaking the surface. The white fur under her hands rippled and was gone, and it was Kellen kneeling over her on the asphalt, human bare, his hands flying to the wound at her throat, his face a mask of horror. "No," he said. "No, no, what did I don't." And then his eyes changed, because the curse was breaking. She watched it happen. Watched the memories crash back into him all at once, the forest, the bandaged ankle, the beach at dawn, every moment. His cursed mind had let fall through its fingers. Watched him look at her, really look at her, and know her for the very first time as a man. "Ren," he breathed, like a prayer, like a drowning man saying the name of air. "Ren, oh my God, I remember you." "I know," she said, and smiled up at him through the blood. "Took you long enough." But the fire was still spreading, and her bones had begun to sing with a terrible pressure, and she felt the change gathering to break her, the way it had broken Nora. Except it didn't break her, because she was not Nora. She was the thing they'd thrown into the woods for being wrong. And the wrong thing rose up in her now and took the fire and made it hers, her spine, arching her bones, cracking, and realigning the agony, cresting and turning somehow into something that felt less like dying and more like being born. And where Ren had lain broken on the road, a wolf rose up, gray, sleek, with brown eyes that found Kellen's and held them. He let out a sound that was half a sob, and she stepped to him unsteady on new legs and pressed her muzzle to the curve of his neck. And then, deliberately choosing it the way she had chosen everything on this road, she bit down. The bond snapped shut, complete, anchoring him, naming him hers the way he had named her his. The feral turn that had been dragging him under for weeks let go all at once. When the shift released her, she was Ren again, human shaking alive, and the pack stood in a loose ring around them, no longer hunting, just watching. Because the law had two edges, and she had turned the other one. Elise reached them first, tears streaking her face. "You did it," she whispered. "You absolute impossible woman." You anchored him. Behind them, Ren's family stood frozen at the edge of the road. Her mother's hand pressed to her mouth. Her father's arm around Sienna. Reed a little apart from all of them, pale and forgotten, already fading out of a story that had never really been about him. A pack member pressed a coat into Kellen's hands, and he wrapped it around Ren's shoulders and gathered her against his chest, and for a moment, the two of them just breathed each other in. "You could have died," he said into her hair. "You threw yourself out of a car. You left me dead rabbits." A broken laugh tore out of him. "That's not the wolf does that I don't." "I know." She pulled back to look at him. at those eyes blue again and clear and full for the first time of her. I know exactly who you are, Kellen Thorne, both halves, and I'm not afraid of either one. She thought of Nora Vance, then, of a woman who swam at dawn and wrote letters she never sent, and loved someone in secret, and died for a curse she never got the chance to fight. And she made herself a second promise quieter than the first. I'll tell your story, the real one, not the ghost they made of you. You were the beginning of the end of this thing, and I'm going to be the end of it, for both of us. She turned to face her family. She didn't go to accuse them. She'd carried enough anger to fuel a lifetime, and she was setting it down along with everything else. She simply walked up to her mother, the woman who had found a discarded baby in the woods and fought through hearings and home visits to keep her, and she took her trembling hands. "You should have told me," Wren said, "about being adopted. That was mine to know." "I'm so sorry, Wren. I know. You were afraid I'd feel unwanted." Wren's eyes filled. "But Mom, you're the ones who wanted me. Someone left me in those trees because I was born wrong for them. And you looked at that same throwaway thing, and you drove home, and you kept me." Her voice broke. "You were never the ones who abandoned me. You were the ones who chose me. I forgot that somewhere along the way. I'm sorry." Her mother folded her into her arms and wept. And Wren, over her mother's shoulder, found she had it in her to forgive even the ones who'd left her in the dark. Not because they'd earned it, but because carrying that particular stone had never once made her lighter, and she was so tired of being weighed down by things that were never her fault to begin with. 4 years later, Wren lay in a wide bed in the east wing of Ashmore, gripping Kellen's hand hard enough to hurt, and pushed. "One more," the midwife said. "One more, Luna." That was what they called her now. Luna. The one who had walked into the fire and come out whole. The one who broke the curse. "You're almost there," Kellen whispered against her temple. And through the bond, she felt his awe and his terror, and his love all braided together, and she bore down one final time. A cry split the air. Small, furious, perfect, a boy. They laid him on her chest, red and squalling tiny fists beating at the world, and Wren looked down at her son through a blur of tears, and said the only thing that mattered. The thing no one had ever said to her in those woods all those years ago. "You're wanted," she whispered. "Do you hear me? You will always, always be wanted." Kellen made a sound beside her. She looked up. He'd come so far from the man who drank a bottle every night to forget her, from the boy who buried his father, and the woman his father killed. There'd been years of nightmares. Years of him pulling away in the dark, convinced the wolf would surface and hurt her. It had taken every ounce of patience she had to teach him what she'd finally learned herself, that love isn't the thing that hunts you. It's the thing that stays. "He's free," Kellen said, touching the baby's cheek like it might vanish. "The first thorn, and I can feel it, Wren. There's no curse in him. It ended. It ended with us." "How can you be sure?" He smiled, and it reached all the way to his eyes. "Because you didn't just break the bond," he said. "You broke the chain." That evening, he carried their son out to the waiting pack. Wren's family stood at the front, beaming her, mother, dabbing at her eyes. Sienna holding up a phone to take pictures. Sienna, who had left Reed months ago once she understood she deserved someone who'd wanted her first, and who had become, in the leaving, someone Wren could finally love, without the old ache between them. Kellen lifted the child high. "Our son," he called out. the next alpha of Ashmore, born free of the curse that has ridden our blood for generations. And one by one, every wolf lowered its head, not to Kellen, to Wren, to the Lunar who had been left in the woods and told she was nothing. The unseen sister, the one who'd spent 20 years grateful for scraps, who had learned at last and against everything that her worth was never a gift anyone else could give or take away. Her mother gasped softly, understanding for the first time exactly what her daughter had become. Later, when the pack had gone and the house had gone quiet, Kellen knelt beside their bed and touched the baby's downy head. "What do we name him?" Wren asked. "Something that looks forward," Kellen said, "not back." She thought about it, about a girl afraid of the water, about a wolf at a window, about a woman who chose wide awake to walk into the fire, about Nora Vance, whose story she had told after all to the pack, to the town, until the ghost became a person again. And the beach where she died became a place where people left flowers instead of fear. "Rowan," Wren said. It means strength, and it grows toward the light." Rowan. Kellen tried the name and smiled. "Our strong one." Moonlight spilled through the window and pooled silver on the floor, the way it had that first night in the clearing, when a wolf with impossible eyes had looked at a woman no one else ever saw and seen her all the way down. Wren gathered her son a little closer. Outside the pines stood dark and steady against the stars, and the sea went on breathing below the cliffs. And for the first time in her life, she felt no pull toward the tree line, no listening for a sound in the dark. There was nowhere else she needed to be. She had not been born to be cursed. She had been born to break them. And she understood at last what her whole strange life had been for. Not to be chosen, not to be rescued, not to wait at a window for a love that looked straight through her, but to become the kind of woman who could choose herself, and in the choosing set everyone around her free. Thank you all so much for listening. If this story moved you, if Wren's journey stayed with you, take a moment to like this video and leave a comment below. It truly helps the channel more than you know. And I'd love to hear from you. Is there a story, a theme, or a kind of heroine you've been longing to see? Tell me in the comments. I'm already dreaming up the next one, and it just might be yours.